Hey, think we will start in a couple of minutes. Can still see a lot of you joining in right now.
Nick, there's one question from the Q&A. Is that the Harbour Bridge?
That is the Harbour Bridge, yes.
It's a virtual background. It's a fake background.
We are the Tenable offices in Australia are based out of North Sydney, so we've got a very nice view of the Harbour Bridge and the harbour for that matter. So,
Hey, think we just wait for another minute before we start. Just stay with us. Okay, let's start. Good morning, good afternoon, or good day to everyone who joined from around the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'll be your host today, and I'm Bing Chun. I'm one of the cloud security engineers based out of Malaysia. Together with me today, we have Ricky. Ricky is the channel SE, managing a APJ, and Nick, which has a very nice view behind him, based out of Sydney. He will be introducing himself shortly. Some of the housekeeping note before we start the session, please put all your question into Q&A panel, and we have the panelists who will be answering your question. You are not to be forgotten. I think Frank is in the call as well as a panelist. Frank is actually leading the APJ business for cloud security. Just feel free to ask your question and make sure you put it into Q&A, and we will answer the question. I think towards the end, we will be discussing the next session. This is some crucial information around how do you get hold of the demo access into our demo environment. And the second thing will be what will be the next. That is, there will be a 4 hours admin session happening in December. Those information will be available towards the end of this session. Okay, and now I'll just hand over to Nick.
thanks, Wing Chun. I appreciate it. As Wing Chun mentioned, my name's Nick Burke. I'm based out of, as you can probably see, Sydney, Australia, with a stunning view in the background. I've been with Tenable for almost 7 years as a security engineer, and now in the cloud security space. Obviously been on board for a long time. Keen to kind of set the scene for a partner perspective, as well as our value-added resellers, distribution channels throughout APJ. Very keen to obviously launch into the technology. I know we're always eager and keen, but I definitely want to level set with the team, really around I guess why Tenable and what the reason we've made this strong investment in a really strong capability. With that, I'm just going to go through a quick agenda. Obviously, the why and the level set. Both myself and Wing Chun will be doing a demonstration of the platform. We've got some resources, some call to actions, or some what's next, and obviously, as Wing Chun mentioned, we have a session for question and answers. But if you do have questions, as Wing Chun said, please use the Q&A session functionality through the section, throughout the session. That'll allow us to give context, and we'll probably in going through some of those questions as we roll on as well. So yeah, with that, without further ado, I want to jump into, I guess, setting the scene for Tenable. Obviously, we've seen and we continue to see dramatic breaches. We've had a number of recent ones. I think there's been a recent one in a transport provider. We see that from shipping and that the likes of that, making global news. But predominantly through the course of, I guess, the last few years, we've seen that the predominantly large amount of breaches have been caused by inappropriate identity, inappropriate access, and ultimately that the good hygiene and capabilities of security tools are really missing a trick. Organizations are, there's a lot of data that is exposed, a lot of customer information, a lot of person identifying information, and fundamentally, it's very easy to exfiltrate information. We see that across the board. The real world scenarios of identity being a factor, but also just the pure speed and capability of cloud resources means that incidents, penetrations are, we're talking a sub-minute now. When we look to areas like secrets being revealed, mismanaged credentials, and as well as that access and entitlement means fundamentally we need a new approach, or to really bolster the capabilities of our security teams as well as our end customer security teams, and really act as a force multiplier with some capabilities to improve the way they're going about securing their environment and very specifically the cloud. The speed of the cloud gives us the capability to execute quickly, but it also has that the same benefits for a malicious third party. They may be able to expose things, exfiltrate information much faster than we've seen before. And I'm not going to go through every one of these. Don't worry, team. You can read them on the screen, but also I've got so many other numerous examples of this capability of what's going on in the real world at a global level, but also, within APJ. It's very important to be aware that the basics are still really key in securing a customer's environments. And I think when we look to the cloud, I think this is an amazing, and I would just call this out as a very much an intentional eye chart. It's here to, I won't say confound, but just to explain that the complexity that's been brought to infrastructure in the cloud environment today. Every resource has ways to access it. They need to access other resources. Those identities and entitlements are fundamental to understanding how applications work, but also how we then can secure them. And so this complexity is very much designed to be irreducible. We are at the simplest way forward, and yet you can see the level of detail that is associated with a single cloud provider. I didn't think it appropriate today to share the other two. I'm not trying to scare everyone into being worried about identity as a control point. But suffice to say, the idea of sharing and showing something to this extent means that we need to have a way to approach this effectively. We need to be able to understand what resources are exposed, what access and potential risks are associated with identities, service principals, users, all of those other things that we very much associate. The great thing about leveraging identity as our key capability is that moving from identity into other areas of the cloud ecosystem means that we have a basis in understanding the potential for breach, understanding the potential impact a breach could have. What could an attacker do or a malicious actor do in your environment if they were to take control of a single resource? What is that impact radius? How far do we have to go to understand that? And providing that visibility of lateral movement and breach type activities means that fundamentally we have a viewpoint that ties back to a core capability, which is something that's just as simple as least privilege. Now, if we look to why Tenable's looked into identity-based security and identity-based, particularly cloud security in my space and insurance space, we're fundamentally trying to approach a customer problem, which is securing their cloud environment, ensuring that we have a multifaceted, multidisciplinary area of approaches. We can go in after configuration. We can go in after and understand the entitlements and identities. At the same time, bringing the power of Tenable across areas like vulnerability and software risk exposure. Bringing that together with more modern techniques of deployment, be it infrastructure as code or Git-based operations, and tying that into the ways that applications are deployed today in areas like Kubernetes and containerization. Now, all of those acronyms are fun and exciting and a lot of words and a lot of mouthful of words. And I can always be accused of having a yarn. But what we need to be able to do is bring those together in a way that we can operationalize them. How do we look at the behavior that's actually occurring and identify it and help then respond to it in a capability that's super powerful for our end customers and our users of the cloud services. Fundamentally, we want security and the cloud to be in lockstep, in unison, implementing applications and delivering value to organizations quickly, effectively, and with great velocity. Now, one of the keys is the amount of information that Tenable brings to the story with the cloud security capability. It all needs to be tied together to provide meaningful insight and action for our customers. We need to be able to deliver a rich data set through things like exposure scorecards, really rich information provided around lateral movement through attack path analysis. And fundamentally then being able to bring that data together from multiple disparate sources and produce a high-level outcome, understanding the attack surface. And fundamentally, that's what Tenable is approaching the industry with, which is we are an exposure management platform. Let's understand what is a risk to the organization, regardless of the type of asset it is or how we've collected that information. Apply that in ways that is consumable, being able to bring in asset information, being able to bring in vulnerability information from other sources, tying that together in a way that acts as a force multiplier for the security professionals. How do we make sure that that information is fed up, reported upon appropriately? And that's very much the key driver. And cloud security is one of the big rocks for Tenable in this space. We've got such rich information that we need to be able to process and provide it in context of the overall environment. Very much focused upon, at the same time, ensuring the cloud is secure, as well as giving more and more insight into areas. Now, with that, that's enough level setting, enough talking from slides. I am an engineer. I want to jump into the tooling and technology. And that means I can stop doing my demonstration and I'll jump into a demonstration piece. So just to set the agenda of what I will be covering today, we're going to run this in two parts. I will do my demonstration first, and I will pass it over to Wing Chun to really bring it home and talk through some capabilities. I'm very much going to set the scene of how we collect information, how we onboard accounts, how we can make it relevant and super easy for organizations to get insight into their cloud environment. I don't want to go into the security findings myself. I'm going to leave that up to Wing Chun to understand that he has that capability to deliver upon. Now, with that, I actually want to talk about our inventory. I want to talk about what we're collecting. And so I'm going to take a really simple example here. And that example is just an EC2 instance. I'm going to go through into my compute section. I'm going to look into my virtual machines, and I'm going to choose a resource to explain the capability of what we're doing today. Now, I don't want to go too deep. I don't want to deep dive and spoil the rest of the session today. I know we've got a fair bit of time to go through a lot of detail here. I really want to show how we're bringing information together to then provide the value which Wing Chun will talk to. So Tenable Cloud Security is collecting information from resources, from the cloud service providers using API-driven, effectively agentless technology. We don't have to deploy any software on servers or anything to be able to produce the findings that we are. Fundamentally, you are collecting metadata, analyzing that metadata, and being able to make security recommendations, remediation options, as well as just providing an overall risk posture. So you can see here, I've got a lot of metadata. You can see I've got hyperlinks to talk about, the sources, the resources groups, how we're allocating. I'm already probably giving away a little bit of the story around things like vulnerabilities from this one page. Now, we can keep our page here and understand what we've been looking through from a triage perspective. We've got a lot of powerful information at our fingertips here. We're also able to mark and label our resources, automatically through the platform, as well as provide the ability to raise and change sensitive assets. If we've got what I would refer to as a crown jewel resource, we can tag that as sensitive. We can label that as sensitive. So, producing network information and metadata from the platform, I'm very much able to start to analyze that effectively. Now, Tenable Cloud Security is producing graphs of this information. So yes, we have lists, yes, we have information, but fundamentally we're able to visually represent that to simplify the capability, understand how things are flowing. Now, this is a very simple network graph. We have a resource, a virtual machine. It has 3 ports exposed, one of which is 3389, and all of those ports, including the 2 web ports, are exposed to the entire world through the internet. It's not overly interesting, but it is a risk that this system is sitting on the internet, particularly when we start to talk to what is installed on the system, what software has been deployed, and therefore we're able to detect the vulnerabilities. And this isn't to say there is anything wrong with agents, but we are doing this in the cloud in a manner which is, again, without using agents, that doesn't have a performance impact on the production or non-production workload. The workload will continue to operate and run at full capacity. We leverage the cloud service provider's tool set to provide us this information, which we can report software vulnerabilities on. Now, I'm building a story out. I've got my story arc, and I'm building it up to the interesting capabilities where we're seeing the more and more value for our customers. Building it out from understanding how a resource sits in the environment, understanding what software is on it, and ultimately how that is a risk to the environment. And because of that, we look at every resource individually, and we're building out what I can only describe as a phenomenal eye chart. We're able to filter down on this through these environments. You can see I can filter down on what specific resources, but I will zoom in just to make it a little bit simpler and easy to view and understand. So I'm just going to drag this around, and I will explain what we're seeing here, if I can use my control key effectively. So this particular server, a virtual machine in Azure, has the ability to assume an identity. It can take on additional permissions rather than just being a server. We're working in environments where they work together. Now, this particular identity has the ability to be a virtual machine administrator. To me, one system being able to manage other virtual machines seems, there are use cases for it, but it seems something that we could be a little bit cautious of. Now, interestingly enough, this particular resource as a virtual machine administrator can actually control 13 other virtual machines. You can go see what it can control. You can see what it can understand. You can see here that there's a lot of systems that it can report over and administer. You know, a malicious actor could take advantage of that. Now, at a view, at an understanding level, there are multiple colors on the screen. The red text arrow, indicates that a permission is excessive. Now, from an identity perspective, what does this mean and why is this important? And I'd really like to clarify that and help the team understand that. And fundamentally, an excessive permission means that a permission that hasn't been used. That really lends itself to saying, well, okay, if it hasn't been used in a period of 90 days, maybe we shouldn't have that permission entitled. You're not using those permissions. You don't need to go manage other virtual machines because you've never done it. And so we'll start to then be able to apply a capability like least privilege. Now, because we're tracking the state of those permissions, we're also starting to find interesting things around how the environment is used and how we can start to be permissive. So this is a single resource, and you can see by the sheer size of the capability, the things it could access. And so this means that the impact radius of this system is very large and could have a flow-on effect if it was to be compromised. And when I say if it was to be compromised, I'll bring you back to the network graph as a very strong hint towards Wing Chun and what he will be showing this afternoon and this morning, as well as all of those software vulnerabilities that this resource has. I think I may have given away the story here, but I do want to say this is how we're detecting that. And you can see that we're detecting this across all of our cloud technologies. It's not just virtual machines. We're doing this across identities. We're looking at those resources in a federated manner. So I can go so far as to look into a federated identity from my Okta. I can absolutely understand what users are coming in through Okta. I can bring in through Entra ID, also known as Azure AD, what resources they can access. We're chasing down and understanding everything that a user can absolutely do in an environment, and if they've ever done it as well. So this capability is driving us towards a state of understanding the cloud environment holistically. You know, I want to be very clear. My goal is to set up the punchline for Wing Chun. So I want to continue to show a few other bits and pieces and capabilities of the resources of the platform. Sorry. So we're very much able to onboard resources, and you can see here, I'm able to onboard cloud resources. I'm not going to save this or give it a temp name. I can actually then have and choose what level of monitoring and access the cloud platform receives. We can go so far as to implement remediation actions and take one-click remediation steps. And we can do that from a position that is still driven by a user, still driven by a security professional that is making decisions. We can switch on and off capabilities while we're onboarding those resources. You know, very, very simply, we're then providing the information for our end users to onboard resources into the cloud very, very simply and easily. We've got custom permissions. We're not identifying and exposing information unnecessarily to the world. You know, it's very much you are still in control, or your customers are still in control of their cloud environments, and they can see what's doing. And Tenable is absolutely still behaving and operating ourselves in a way which we absolutely understand the environment. So I've gone into my permissions query here, and I'm actually going to look into the resources, understand where things have come from. I could go so far as to understand what every single identity and user has done and what they have access to. We're actually producing a finding, all of our findings, interrogation of and understanding of those resources. You can see here that we're actually producing an activity log. So we're starting to lean towards that understanding the cloud environment. Rather than trying to do everything as a single point in time assessment, we're doing continual assessments across the board. It fundamentally means that we can shift our capabilities and thinkings to responding to incidents. We're not generating noise. We're not generating findings. That identity is key. Reducing excessive permissions can lead us towards a state where we can enable users to do capabilities like just-in-time access. Just-in-time access allows us to provide a position of least privilege to all users until they request the need to escalate their privilege. Now, this sounds like a really interesting area in terms of how do you do that? What do you do? I think the easiest way to explain it is actually to show the use case and talk to it. So you'll have to excuse me. I'm just swapping browsers here just because I'm logged in as a different user. So I have a user here. I have the ability as a user to request resources, and I'm just going to jump back to the right section. This is what I get for jumping in. So I'm just going to have to readjust my screen, unfortunately. I've just got the hovering things above it. And you can see here my entire history of the access requests that I've made. So I'll build a hypothetical for the team. Please indulge my use of imagination and as a capability here, but I will explain. So Nick wants to build and deploy a new application today. Wing Chun, as my approver, has limited my access down, so I can only do that when I'm working. So I'm really excited. It's Tuesday afternoon in Australia, and I want to deploy a new application. So before I do that, I want to make sure that the Tenable is empowered to do that. Now, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to choose my administrator, and I'm only going to deploy this into my development environment. I'm not going prod. We're not going to do press testing in prod. Now, you can see here, I can set my duration. So how long do I think I'm going to work on this? This could be me solving a problem, but I'm going to say this is going to be a while. I'm going to fundamentally approve. I need to request this access. We can start to see what this means and how we do it. So with that, I'm able to make a request. That means fundamentally we'll be able to select time, and given it's today, I'm actually going to say, I'm going to do this at what time is it? 2:30. So I'm going to say I'm going to start my work at 4 p.m. today. So we're very much able to kick this off. It looks like I'm having a late night, but I'm going to put that request in. So it's going to sit here, and I can't take access. I can't deploy that application until we get that approval. Now, this just-in-time capability, I want to let Wing Chun explain and show the rest of the workflow as to why it's important. So I'm going to stop my sharing for a second. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to me, and I'll pass it over to Wing Chun.
Hey, so hopefully I'm audible. So continuing from the Nick demo, this is the approval screen, meaning that as part of the JIT workflow, upon a requester put in a request as part of the approval workflow, I will get the request. So let me do a quick refresh. Sorry, hopefully it's not timeout. Okay. Oh, okay, it's here. Okay, so here, pending approval. So this is what Nick has put in the request earlier to deploy a new app. Please approve. Should I approve this, Nick? Okay, so we provide a very easy workflow for a JIT access. And as an approver, I can go ahead and approve this. And upon approving this request, it will go down to this view, the approved view, and pending activation. So pending activation meaning that the requester will then come into this dashboard to connect to the required permission. So all these once is go into the cloud environment is all being tracked. I'll be showing that in a bit. So now let me pivot back to the main console right here. So there's actually two different use cases that I would like to demo today. The first is how do you actually make use of our solution to perform investigation? Because simply put, we are a couple of all these C-level words coming from a CNAP environment, CSPM, your CWP, or CIEM, or rather PIM, and CDR, the cloud detection and response. So what I'll be showcasing is how do we drill deeper into the findings. So before that, there's actually two components that I would like to showcase. That is a toxic combination and my personal favorite, if you only have 5 minutes. So this is the worst of the worst. And why two of these components, why two of these widgets is important? Because when we come to cloud security, there's always a questions coming from a customer. How do we prioritize the remediation? Because you'll be flooded with tons of findings on a daily basis. How do you prioritize the remediation effort instead of going through one by one? So the first thing that I would like to introduce to the team is if you only have 5 minutes, worst of the worst. So every day when your analysts come online, you should be focusing on this widget. This is something that you really need to pay attention to because this is really bad that's happening in the environment. You can go through each of these findings, making sure that it has been remediated. So that is the worst of the worst. Another component which I will dive a little bit deeper is toxic combination. Because earlier, Nick have mentioned there's a CWP, there's a lot of information that are available as part of the solution. If we're able to combine all this information together, we will have this toxic combination, meaning that a particular asset in your cloud is having an issue, and you really need to pay attention to this asset and go ahead and remediate this issue first. So now, let me pick the first toxic combination. In your environment, if you look through these findings alone, there's actually 4 different findings which we have actually combined together. So when we look into this, there's actually 7 workloads happen to be publicly exposed. So that's the first thing. Okay. And secondly, these workload is having critical vulnerabilities that is actually based on our cloud workload protection. And what makes the matter worse, these 7 publicly accessible workload having high privileges. So now, if we were to look into this, what will be the consequence of having this toxic combination? I mean, potentially, the adversary can make use of this publicly workload, go into the environment. The high privilege access, meaning that the permission that this endpoint or rather this workload having can potentially create a new key in a KMS environment and go ahead and perform the encryptions to the host, dump the key, and that's it. So this is a typical ransomware use case. So now, in order to investigate further, this is the second use case that I'll be going through from a blue team, or rather from a purple team perspective. How do you investigate and how do you perform forensic? So now, let me go into this public workload. As you can see here, we cut across 3 major clouds. We have AWS, virtual machine, and Google Compute Engine. Let me go into the EC2. Straight away, automatically, all the filter has been populated. This is one of the key differentiations coming from Tenable Cloud Security because of the data that we are having right now. With all this filter, you can easily pinpoint or rather easily drill down into the information that you would like to research further. So let me pick this awesome requester web server. So if I click into this, these are all the information available. So one thing that is really important when doing investigation is to identifying who is the owner of this asset. So in the overview, we will provide you all this information. For example, this asset happened to be an EC2 asset, obviously. It is coming from AWS account, and this is the account information. It's residing in this region, and all this information just go on and on and on. But most importantly, again, identifying who is the owner of this asset. As you can see here, this asset happened to be coming from a user by the name of Leo. Okay, so we can quickly identify Leo happened to be the owner of this asset. I mean, obviously, there are some other information as well. So one of the key things that I would like to highlight as well is when you are performing investigation, one of the key things is you do not wish to pivot from here to another place. What we're trying to achieve here is all the information that you are trying to research and try to find out is all remain on the same page. Right now, because of this toxic combination, we will have all this information available right from the same screen. So for this asset, earlier that we have this toxic combination, we can straight away go into the findings. Why are we even flagging this as a toxic combination? That is because of all these findings available, or rather all these findings that we have identified. Let me quickly go through some of these findings before I jump into some other things. So the first thing is a major call out. These EC2 having overprivileged IAM role assignment. So if I click into this again, I am not pivoting out from this same view. I'm still remaining on the same view. So next thing that I would like you to pay attention into the context. So the context are all the information we were able to gather. And I also like you to pay attention to the severity, critical. So these particular findings we classify as a critical severity. And one thing about this severity, it is not static. It is dynamic. How do we assign this severity? It's based on the context that we're able to gather. So as you can see here, why are we classifying these findings as critical? Simply because the role EC2 Instant Web App role created 3 years ago, and for whatever reason, is just active 2 hours ago. And the context just go on. And why are we assigning this severity as critical? This is the final verdict. So the last line in the context is the final verdict. This finding has critical severity since the role has high severity excessive permission and is linked to internet-facing compute instance with critical vulnerabilities. And we provide you the visualization on the permission, because as you can see here, the context is discussing about overprivileges. So hence we narrow down to the actual privilege that these EC2 has the ability to assume. And this particular IAM role having S3 full access, and in turn having access to 39 different S3 buckets. So these are some of these informations as well. Okay, so if I were to go back into the main page, again, I am not leaving the page, it's all within the same view. So the next thing which Nick briefly mentioned, which is the permission graph. If you would like to drill a little bit deeper, why is this EC2 having highly critical privilege? So when we look into this, yeah, I know it's kind of small. Let me quickly zoom in. So as you can see here, this EC2 has a EC2 Instant Web App role attached to this asset, which in turn, this EC2 can assume this role and get full access into S3 and having the S3 resource-based policy as well. And what I really like is when you are performing investigation. And if this graph is highly populated, which is very hard for you to go through, you can then turn it into a list view. So with that, you have easy understanding. Okay, right now, EC2 has the ability to access the ECR, the open search, and the list just go on and on. And private prop repository is able to access via this service. And this is the permission assigned to this EC2. So with that, we have an easy understanding, easy visualizations, what is happening for this endpoint, or rather this EC2. So what really interesting is right now, by understanding is EC2 having high permission or rather high privilege, how can we narrow down or rather right size the permission for this EC2? So that is when we have this least privilege policy. As you can see here, there's none here. I can quickly go ahead and generate a right sizing permission for this EC2. So I can generate the least privilege based on the activities that's happened within the last 7 days for this EC2. Let me go ahead and generate this least privilege. We'll come back to this later. So another point that I would like to discuss is network graph. If you remember earlier, part of the toxic combination, this EC2 is publicly exposed. Why are we defining, or rather, why are we flagging this out? Simply because this EC2 having attached to two different security groups, which expose port 80 and port SSH, the TCP22, although the port 22 is very limited down to just 4 IP that you can come into your environment. But again, this is not the best practices for especially administrative port. You should be using a bastion host when it comes to remote management. So hence, we are flagging this as one of the findings. Even this policy only allow up to 4 IPs as compared to port 80, which is wide open. All IPv4 addresses can come into this EC2 via a security group of Open SSH and HTTP security group. Okay, and how do we derive this visualization? Is based on the network information that's available and all this network information that we gather. So one thing to take note, we detect network exposure differently. We don't just look at the security group. We will correlate all this information and finally give you a verdict that this EC2 is publicly exposed. How are we doing that? By looking into the EC2, do you have a public IP assigned? Or rather the EIP assigned to this EC2? So in this case, yes. And is this network card ENI attached to a VPC with an internet gateway attached to this VPC? So the answer is yes. So with that, we will then assign the network exposure, which is the direct internet reachability from the external world. So that is how we called out. And why is this important? Again, we do this analysis automatically, and you do not need to go down and hunt down all this information, and all within the same view. And the last thing before I fill it out from this screen is this label. All these labels are automatically assigned based on the information we managed to gather. And why are we labeling this EC2 as vulnerable? That is based on the vulnerability that we managed to gather. And by looking into the vulnerability views, we have all this information available. And this is publicly accessible. That's based on the network analysis that we have done. And privilege is based on the permission graph that I have shown earlier. So again, this is just a typical workflow when you are performing investigation. Okay, so this is a typical blue team exercise when you are doing some defense. The next thing, the next use case that I would like to showcase, which is central around the identity, is if today, if you would like to perform some threat hunting and you come up with a hypothesis, okay, some user managed to access to certain resources in my environment. So I mean, typically when you come with a hypothesis, it's a very detailed hypothesis. But let me call this out. So if today I would like to perform an investigation, so permission query allow you to search through, or rather allow you to answer one very important question: who has access to what? Okay, so if today you would like to perform an investigation, you can quickly bring down additional filter if all this pre-populated filter is not something that you want. As you can see here, I've created a new filter, which is identity. Let me check against two users here, parent, okay, and another user by the name of Ali. So as you can see here, now I am researching these two users, first being Darren, the second user being Ali. So with this view, we can straight away identify Darren happen to be coming from, okay, I should have gone full screen. Okay. So Darren happened to be an AAD user or Entra ID user coming from a Matic Customer 3 tenant. This user right now is having a little bit shy of 15,000 permission. It is granted through 6 different role assignment, Azure role assignment. And all this permission allow Darren able to access to a little bit more than 300 resources in your environment. So this is at glance view what this user is having today. If you would like to find a little bit deeper, what are there any findings that we are able to identify for this user? I can actually quickly go into this user and look through the first thing which I highlighted earlier, the label. Right now, Darren happened to be a sensitive user and performing some anomaly action in our environment. And what made this user, or what made this finding worse is Darren happened to be an admin user. Why are we classifying Darren as admin and having anomaly? So that's actually bring us to the findings. Again, it's the same view. This Darren happened to be an inactive IM role in AWS. Again, it's multi-cloud. This is a AD user, but also having an AWS IM role, which Darren hasn't been using for the longest time. But what really interesting is the anomaly. Darren right now has performed some unusual network access management. So let me dive a little bit deeper into this. What is this all about? Darren has performed an action, which if you're familiar with the Azure environment, this is the Cloud Native Firewall or NSG, Network Security Group. We have not seen Darren make change to the NSG before, but one fine day, Darren started modifying the NSG in Azure. Something is not right, okay? And Darren is coming from an IP, which is 71.201, 192, and 145. So these are the information that we were able to gather. And this is actually affecting security group or NSG of Danny-machine-NSG. And this is the final verdict. User Darren Berg was not observed modifying network access setting before. So this is some of these findings that your blue team or maybe your per team can go through. And with that, I will conclude my demo because we do have some other thing that we would like to go through. Let me quickly come back into the slide. Okay, so as a promise, we will be having a deep dive technical session, and we are calling it administrator training for APJ session. It's going to happen on 6th of December. After this training, you will have I think it's all here. You will be demo certified. So in order for the team to request for demo and request for MSR, you need to be Tenable Cloud Security V2 demo certified. In order to be demo certified, you need to go through a 4-hour instructor-led class. Upon completed the class, you need to sit for a 40-question test at the end. After the test, you will then be certified to be, or rather, Tenable Cloud Security V2 demo certified. When is it? It is happening on 6th of December, 2023. I mean, next month. This is the timing. So please sign up right now. You can scan the QR code now for registration, or you can register via this link. So this QR code will bring you to the registration screen.
Yeah, Wing Chun, I just want to add on a little bit here. So please take note because for the NFR and also the demo system login, so we actually have two things here. So the first one is NFR, the second one is the demo system login to the Tenable Cloud Security. So again, you will need to attend this training, finish the assessment for the 40 questions, then only you will be applicable to apply for that NFR and demo system login. Okay, so this is very important for you guys to attend.
Then I'll just leave this screen on for another 10 seconds.
I have also posted the registration link in the chat box for those who, if you're unable to scan for it.
Yeah, by the way, it will be in English. I mean, the session will be conducted in English. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think that's all. I think any question that in the Q&A would like to bring it live, Nick?
Yeah, look, I'll bring a couple up. I think there's some pretty interesting questions that I'd like to call out, I guess, verbally and open to the team. So, look, there's a great question here around Tenable.cs from a technical perspective. Look, Tenable's cloud security platform continues to evolve. We've enhanced it with the Hermetic acquisition. Fundamentally, we will have a single offering moving forward, the details of which I think we'll be able to reveal over time. We're enabling our end customers today, our MSSP partners, and all of our containers who have an entitlement to the previous iteration of what Tenable Cloud Security will be brought up to the current, to the version 2 or the current offering. The reason I bring that up, and I'm a very open individual, is to be clear, to provide clarity around the situation we're in. Tenable believes that the acquisition of the current technology stack is an enhancement or an improvement around capabilities that our customers and our joint customers really want to embrace the use of cloud, and we think that this provides them the best ability to understand their cyber attack surface and exposure management in the cloud space. Wing Chun, I guess I have a question for you, and I know the answer, but I think I'll ask you because I like to, questions without notice. Is Tenable Cloud Security available for proof of concept or proof of value?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, please work with us. We will be leading the POC right now. Just let us know. We can actually set you up for the POC. I mean, obviously, Ricky has put himself up. You can email to arlene@tenable.com. Yeah, just
I'll
bring us
also
in
add
as well. Yeah.
I'll also add a little bit of context and flavor there. I think there are regions in most regional centres around APJ. We've got Sydney, Singapore, South Korea, China, and Japan. I may have missed one there, Wing Chun, but I'm not going to throw you under the bus to make you work it out. But fundamentally, we've got something like 14 clusters globally, so might be even more now. So continue to evolve those, particularly for those highly specialised environments where you may have some statutory requirements. I guess the question I'll ask for you, Wing Chun, and would be how does the assessment affect the allocation of resource and the resource?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
when we
there's no
assess them for
impact.
risk.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a common questions coming from customer and concern as well, because it's a cloud environment. We are utilizing cloud providers' API, so there will not be any impact to your environment. With regards to cloud workload protection, there will not be any impact to your workload as well.
And I would like to just gently remind everyone, please use the Q&A functionality. It'll help us frame up the questions. But I know we've only got a few minutes left, so if there are any last-minute quick questions, we'll throw it open and see if anyone wants to type in a question for us.
Oh, yes, yeah, by
Yeah,
the way, one
go
thing
ahead,
that
Richard.
to note, yeah, sorry about that. For the registration, because it's a hands-on, we will be sending the access to you. It's a sandbox access 1 day prior the training, and to our knowledge, Microsoft, rather M365 or Office 365 email will block that welcome email. Please just take note. I have 3 occasions that the Microsoft has stopped that email and marked it as phishing. So make sure that you check your spam folder. Make sure you check or whatever folder that email might eventually land in. Okay, so that is crucial.
So I've got.
Make sure you have access first. Okay. Yes, sorry, Nick.
No, all good. I've got 2 very quick questions, and I'll jump in and I'll just I'll answer them both very quickly just before we wrap up. What's happening to the old CS? I obviously mentioned that this is a new enhancement. I think what I would say there is that the expectation is that the first thing I would say is that those technologies haven't gone away. Our customers, our joint customers, are still entitled to use that technology. My personal expectation and Tenable's expectation is that we want to provide them enhanced capability moving forward. An appropriate timeline to migrate, we'll be working through with our partners, our MSSP partners, as well as the customers directly ourselves to ensure a nice, smooth, seamless transition. Licensing is based on, fundamentally, licensing is based upon a compute resource. Now, so that means if we went back to our demonstration, the only thing that we're counting is things like EC2 instances. What I would say is that we do have tooling that'll help provide those answers with perfect clarity. We'll be able to get the tools and numbers out of the environments that are out there today and give a hard number. That is typically quite a low number compared to the resources, the network security groups, all the identities that we're assessing. We are only focused on compute resources. That gives us our metric. And with that, we've just come across the top of the hour. So I'd personally like to say thank you to everyone for listening. Really appreciate the time. Wing Chun, over to you.
Thanks for joining us today. And again, as per Ricky putting in the chat, please make sure you join the 4-hour session. I think if you do not have enough of Nick and Wing Chun today, you will see meet us again for that 4 hour session. Okay. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.